Trump administration has torched a 30-year-old trade agreement that slapped a 17% tariff on fresh tomatoes from Mexico.
It comes as the Trump administration has also announced new tariffs that could raise the price of tomatoes at the grocery store.
The U.S. government announcing a new 17% tariff on most fresh Mexican tomatoes.
A strategic masterstroke. President Trump's administration has torn down a 3-decade-old trade deal that unfairly tilted the market toward Mexican tomato imports. In its place now stands a firm 17% tariff, an iron shield that finally restores balance and protects American farmers. This decisive move marks not only the return of fair competition, but the revival of American agricultural dominance. For too long, Washington had signed away leverage. Trump ended that era with the stroke of a pen, and the ripple effects are already reshaping the continent. In the early morning hours, across processing hubs from California to Florida, the change is visible. Facilities that once stood idle now buzz with renewed life. Conveyor belts hum, forklifts move at full pace, and trucks filled with premium American tomatoes roll toward distribution centers. Workers clock back into shifts they thought were gone forever. Farming communities that had been abandoned to the mercy of imports are now alive with purpose and optimism. What began as the correction of trade imbalances has turned into a nationwide agricultural revival. And at the center of it all stands Trump's America First doctrine. Canada was the first to flinch. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency's sudden blockade on United States tomatoes, framed as a safety measure, exposed its real fear: that American agriculture, finally unshackled, would crush their fragile domestic industry. Their talk of pesticide residues was a cover for desperation, but the gamble failed. Instead of crippling America, their ban backfired spectacularly, forcing United States farmers to adapt and innovate at breakneck speed. Trump's tariffs had given them the protection they needed, and Canada's protectionist wall only hardened American resolve. Those 150 truckloads of California tomatoes that Canada rejected at the Peace Bridge, they did not rot. They found eager buyers in American supermarkets, processors, and fast-growing domestic markets hungry for quality produce. The 89 shipments stranded at the Ambassador Bridge were quickly rerouted to underutilized United States facilities. What some Canadian officials thought would be a $340 million blow turned into the seed money of a domestic agricultural boom, one that now sustains more than 2,400 American farming families. Instead of collapse, the Canadian blockade fueled a surge of resilience. And while Canada scrambled in panic, pouring $180 million into hastily built greenhouses in British Columbia and Ontario, American farmers seized the disruption to modernize. They embraced efficiency, technology, and scale that Canadian growers could not match. As one veteran grower in Fresno put it, American quality had always been superior. Now it finally had the shield it deserved. The contrast was brutal. Canada wasted millions on low-yield facilities, while America unleashed billions in private and federal investment that multiplied across the heartland. The shift became nothing short of a $12 billion revolution in American agriculture. Of that, over $7 billion went into cutting-edge greenhouses and hydroponics, creating yields that Mexico and Canada could only dream of. Another $3 billion rebuilt domestic logistics highways, storage, and processing plants designed for speed and resilience. The remainder funded agricultural research and education, ensuring the next generation of American farmers would be the most skilled in the world. What stunned observers was not just the money, but the speed. Agricultural transformations normally take decades. Under Trump's tariffs, America accomplished it in less than a year. Within 8 months, premium United States tomatoes dominated the domestic market, selling at prices 25% higher than imports. Consumers embraced them instantly. After decades of inconsistent supply from Mexico and price games from Canada, Americans rediscovered the taste of reliability. Homegrown, abundant, and protected. The revival did not stop at market charts. In farm towns across California and the Midwest, the change was visible in people's lives. In Watsonville, a plant that had been running skeleton crews now operated 3 shifts around the clock. Trucking firms, once dependent on cross-border freight, pivoted to lucrative domestic contracts. Fertilizer suppliers, mechanics, and rural shops saw business triple. Economists called it the multiplier effect. Every farm dollar creates two more in the community. Locals called it a miracle, and they credited Trump for giving them the chance to fight back. Employment in agricultural counties surged. Families that had considered abandoning ancestral farms invested in the future. Schools that had faced declining enrollment saw stability return as young families stayed put. In Delano, a superintendent described how every family that remained meant stronger classrooms, better funding, and renewed pride. Rural hospitals, once at risk of closure, saw rising patient numbers as communities grew healthier and more secure. Property values across California's farming belt rose 15% in 6 months, lifting entire regions from uncertainty to prosperity. Canada's failure was glaring. Their rushed greenhouses could not compete with American technology. Their farmers, hoping to shield themselves from United States exports, found their own markets strained by inefficiency. Mexico fared little better. Trump's tariffs exposed how fragile their infrastructure was when forced to compete head-to-head with American innovation. Both neighbors discovered that America, when protected, does not just compete, it dominates. The strategic brilliance became clear. If a tariff on tomatoes could ignite such a renaissance, what would happen with wheat, soy, and corn? These were not minor commodities. These were the backbone crops of the world's food system. Trump's policy had turned America into the reliable supplier every nation was watching. Europe, weary of supply chain chaos, eyed America as the new benchmark of stability and quality. Technology became America's secret weapon. New United States greenhouses were not just bigger, they were smarter. Sensors tracked soil, water, and light with millisecond precision. Automated systems adjusted conditions in real time. Predictive analytics forecasts demand weeks in advance. Mexican hydroponics, plagued with uneven results, could not keep up. American yields soared, using less water and producing higher quality. Automation cut costs, secured supply, and insulated crops from climate volatility. Universities, long underfunded, now surged ahead with federal and private support. Breakthroughs that had once been exported abroad were now being deployed at home first. The technology gap widened fast. Foreign competitors who once copied American methods now scrambled to understand how far ahead the United States had leapt. Trump's America had turned the tables. Even logistics, once a weakness, became a weapon. Rail lines, storage depots, and trucking fleets, built for America's former abundance, were now fully utilized. Costs per shipment fell as facilities ran at capacity, making United States produce more competitive than ever. Trucking companies tied to domestic agriculture reported revenues up more than 60%. Rail companies carried massive volumes profitably, fueling further infrastructure upgrades. The backbone of American food supply was firing on all cylinders. Supermarkets followed the trend. Shelves once stacked with inconsistent imports now showcased premium domestic tomatoes. Grocery chains embraced the change, driven by consumer demand for quality and reliability. Food security was not a political slogan anymore, it was visible on every supermarket shelf. American farms were feeding American families first, and the people wanted more. For farmers, the lesson was undeniable. Strong trade policy works. Generations who had fought uphill against subsidized imports now stood on even ground. Banks, once hesitant to finance farms, opened their doors wide. The Federal Reserve's Agricultural Lending Survey revealed it. Loan approvals in protected regions surged 78%. Farm investments jumped 45% in 8 months. What had been written off as a dying industry now looked like the frontier of prosperity. The numbers tell the story. $340 million in saved revenue redirected into $12 billion of growth. More than 24,000 farming families strengthened. Agricultural employment up 34%. Loan approvals surging. Investment climbing. And all of it built on one principle, America first. But beyond the statistics was something deeper. Families bought back land. Children returned to family farms. Small towns wrote new futures. Across the countryside, people understood what had changed. This was not just luck, it was leadership. It was Trump putting American farmers first and delivering victory where others had delivered surrender. The conclusion became impossible to ignore. Canada's gamble had failed, Mexico's hopes of stepping in had crumbled, and America had turned a supposed crisis into the greatest agricultural revival in modern history. What the experts had dismissed as reckless tariffs revealed themselves as a master plan, one that ripped apart unfair agreements, exposed foreign weakness, and unleashed America's unmatched capacity for innovation. In Ottawa, policymakers were left scrambling. Billions poured into fragile greenhouse projects could not match the scale or quality of American production. Instead of securing independence, Canada found itself trapped with overpriced facilities and frustrated consumers demanding the very tomatoes they had tried to keep out. Their attempt to sideline United States farmers had backfired so completely that even their own domestic press began calling it Canada's agricultural blunder of the century. Mexico, too, could not hide from the new reality. For decades, their tomato exports had been subsidized, their access to American markets taken for granted. Trump's tariffs shattered that illusion. Lacking the infrastructure, the water technology, and the logistics to compete, Mexico was left in the dust as America surged forward. What once looked like opportunity quickly revealed itself as limitation. Meanwhile, in the United States, the mood was unmistakable. Farming towns that had been on the verge of extinction were thriving again. Banks were lending. Property values were climbing. Young people who had sworn never to farm were returning to the land with renewed pride. Across the Midwest and California's valleys, there was one constant message on everyone's lips. Trump gave us back our future. The strategy went beyond tomatoes. Food security, long ignored in the globalized era, was now front and center. America was proving it could not only feed itself, but become the most reliable supplier to the world. Europe, Asia, even Middle Eastern markets looked at the United States with growing interest. If America could stabilize tomatoes, imagine what it could do with grains, soy, and protein. The foundation for global agricultural dominance was being laid, and Trump's policies had lit the spark. This was not just about economics, it was about sovereignty. Nations that control their food supply, control their destiny. Trump understood this, and his tariffs were never about short-term headlines. They were about long-term independence. By tearing down bad deals and standing up to unfair competitors, he forced a reset that proved America's true strength: innovation, resilience, and the unmatched will of its people. The numbers continued to rise, but behind every statistic was a family, a town, a generation lifted up. For the first time in decades, rural America believed again. The message was clear: when America defends its own, America wins. And as the world watched, one truth echoed across farms, towns, and cities alike. Trump's tariffs did not just save an industry. They sparked an agricultural revolution. This is how America, once written off as dependent on imports, reclaimed its crown. Canada stumbled, Mexico faltered, but America rose stronger, smarter, and more dominant than ever before. And it all began with one man willing to break the old order and put his farmers first. This was not just policy. This was Trump's victory.